and the tension it was causing, just because some guy had asked me for money and I'd said no. In that instant I let it go. Feeling lighter, I took a deep breath, shook off the tension, and turned my attention to the beautiful day. That night at the station I told Socrates my news. "Soc, I am flying down to LA in a few days to visit my folks. I am going to buy a motorcycle while I am down there. And I just learned this afternoon that the United States Gymnastics Federation is flying Srdan me to Ljubljana, Yugoslavia, to watch the World Gymnastics Championships. They think we're both potential Olympians and want to give us some exposure. How about that?" To my surprise, Socrates just frowned, saying, "What will be, will be." I chose to ignore this and started out the door. "Well, bye for now, Soc. See you in a few weeks." "I'll see you in a few hours," he responded. "Meet me at Ludwig's Fountain at noon." "Okay," I answered, wondering what was up. Then I said goodnight. I got 6 hours sleep, and ran to the fountain just outside the Student Union. Ludwig's Fountain was named after a dog who used to frequent the spot. Several other dogs were romping and splashing there, cooling off from the August heat. A few little kids were wading in the shallow water. Just as the campanile, Buckley's famous bell tower, began to chime the noon hour, saw Soc's shadow at my feet. I was still a little sleepy. "Let's walk," he said. We strolled up through campus, past Sproul Hall, beyond the optometry school and Cowell Hospital, up beyond the football stadium, into the hills of Strawberry Canyon. Finally, he spoke. "For you, Dan, a conscious process of transformation has begun. It cannot be reversed. There's no going back. To try and do so would end in madness. You can only go forward now. You're committed." "You mean like in an institution?" I tried to joke. He grinned. "Perhaps there are similarities." We walked silently then, in the shade of the overgrown bushes along the running trail. "No one can help you beyond a certain point, Dan. I'll be guiding you for a while, but then even I must stand back, and you will be alone. You will be tested severely before you're done. You'll have to develop great inner strength. I only hope it comes in time." The mild bay breeze had stopped and the air was hot. Still, I felt a chill. Shivering in the heat, I watched the lizards scurrying through the underbrush. Soc's last few words had just registered. I glanced over at him. He was gone. Frightened, not knowing why, I hurried down the path. I didn't know it then, but my preparations had ended. My training was about to begin. And it was to begin with an ordeal I almost didn't survive. Book 2 The Warrior's Training the Sword is Sharpened. After storing the Valiant in a rented garage, I boarded the F-bus to San Francisco, connecting with Airport Transit, which got caught in a traffic jam. It looked as if I'd be late for my flight. Anxious thoughts began to arise. I felt my belly tense then. As soon as I noticed it, I let it all go as I'd been trained. I relaxed and enjoyed the scenery along Bayshore Freeway, reflecting on my growing mastery over stressful thoughts which had habitually plagued me in the past. And as it turned out, I caught my plan with seconds to spare. Dad, an older version of me with thinning hair, wearing a bright blue sport shirt over his muscular chest, met me at the airport with a strong handshake and warm smile. Mom's face crinkled sweetly as she greeted me at the door of their apartment with hugs and kisses and news about my sister and nieces and nephews. That evening I was treated to one of Mom's latest piano pieces, Bach, I think it was. The next morning at dawn, Dad and I were out on the golf course. All the while, I'd been tempted to tell them about my adventures with Socrates, but thought better of silence. Perhaps I'd explain it all in writing someday. It was good to visit home, but home seemed so long ago and far away. When Dad and I were sitting in the sauna at Jack LaLanne's health spa after our golf game, he said, "Danny, college life must agree with you. You're different, more relaxed, nicer to be around. Not that you weren't nice to be around before." He was searching for the right words, but I understood. I smiled. If he only knew. I spent most of my time in LA looking for a motorcycle, and finally found a 500cc Triumph. It took me a few days to get comfortable with it, and I almost fell twice, each time thinking I'd seen joy coming out of a store or disappearing around a corner. My final day in LA soon arrived. Early the next morning I'd zoom up the coast to Berkeley, Meet said that evening, and we'd take off for Yugoslavia in the World Gymnastics Championships. I relaxed around the house during the day. After dinner, I took crash helmet in the hand and left the house to shop for a traveling bag. As I walked out the door, I heard Dad say, "Be careful, Dan, motorcycles are hard to see at night." His usual caution. "Yeah, Dad, I'll be careful," I yelled back. Then I gunned the bike and pulled out into the traffic feeling very macho in my gymnastics t-shirt, faded Levi's, and work boots. Invigorated by the cool evening air, I headed south toward Wilshire. My future was about to change, because at that moment, 3 blocks ahead, George Wilson was preparing to make a left turn on Western Avenue. I roared through the dusk. The streetlights flashed by as I approached 7th and Western. I was about to cut through the intersection when I noticed a red and white Buick facing me, signaling for a left turn. I slowed down, a small precaution which probably saved my life. Just as my bike entered the intersection, the Buick suddenly accelerated, turning directly in front of me. For a few more precious seconds, the body I was born with was still in one piece. There was time enough to think, but not to act. Cut left, my mind screamed. But there was oncoming traffic. Swerve right. I'd never clear the fender. Lay it down. I'd slide under the wheels. My options were gone. I slammed on the brakes and waited. It was unreal, like a dream, until I saw a flashing image of the driver's horrified face. With a terrible thud and the musical sound of tinkling glass, my bike smashed into the car's front fender, and my right leg shattered. Then everything sped up horribly as the world turned black. I must have lost and regained consciousness just after my body somersaulted over the car and crashed onto the concrete. A moment of blessed numbness, then the pain began, like a searing, red-hot vice, squeezing and crushing my leg tighter and tighter until it became more than I could bear, and I started to scream. I wanted it to stop. I prayed for unconsciousness. Faraway voices. ... just didn't see him. Parents' phone number. ... take it easy, they'll be here soon. Then I heard a faraway siren, and hands were removing my helmet, lifting me onto a stretcher. I looked down and saw a white bone sticking out through the torn leather of my boot. With the slam of the ambulance door, suddenly recalled Sock's words, "And you will be tested severely before you're done." Seconds later, it seemed, I was lying on the X-ray table in the emergency room of LA Orthopedic Hospital. The doctor complained of fatigue. My parents rushed into the room, looking very old and very pale. That's when reality caught up with me. Numb and in shock, I began to cry. The doctor worked efficiently, anesthetizing me, snapping my dislocated toes back into place, and sewing up my right foot. Later, in the operating room, his scalpel sliced a long red line deep into my skin, cutting through the muscles that had worked for me so well. He removed bone from my pelvis and grafted it to the fragments of my right thigh bone. Finally, he hammered narrow metal rod down the center of my bone, from the hip, a kind of internal cast. I was semi-conscious for 3 days, in a drugged sleep that barely separated me from the agonizing,